Hi folks, welcome to the latest MWIS Outlook. This updated on Tuesday the 9th of February. It's bitterly cold at the moment across the mountains and will stay that way through the rest of this week. All the terrain pretty much frozen. We've got extensive snow cover focused across eastern regions, substantial depths, and that will be around for some time to come. We're picking up on a strengthening southeasterly wind in the second half of this week, one that will likely produce sustained gale or severe gales across the mountains even onwards into the weekend. But things drying up with not really too much additional snowfall to be seen. The chart which shows freezing level is a very straightforward one in the next few days. It's sustained deep freeze across Britain. Temperature during Tuesday, during the daytime on Cairngorm Summit, was as low as -11, and we had a minimum temperature overnight in the glens across the Highlands as low as -16 at Altnahara. Those temperatures may be even lower in some of the glens as we go through the next few nights, so we'll be watching those observations very closely. Will we get a -20 somewhere in the Highlands? Just to run this sequence onwards, that's through Thursday. This is as we head onwards towards Friday. Not a great deal changing with this chart really. The very cold air is very much staying in place as we head to the end of the week and approach the weekend. Just subtle changes then begin to develop as we head onwards through the weekend, just as we begin to pull in some air from the south-southwest. But still, extensively frozen terrain is likely to be around. There may be subtle changes across Wales. It may well be that temperatures do just lift somewhat and we do get a little bit above freezing, particularly on lower slopes and locally even a little bit higher up, but it's going to do very little in terms of thawing any of that lying snow. Just looking at the technical detail of this chart, it's quite interesting just what's happened by Sunday, and it's really a part and parcel of the strong southeasterly flow that's in place. Very cold air on the upslopes of the mountains in direct exposure to that southeasterly, but where the air has then crossed the mountains, those placed in the lee of the higher ground, the northern and western parts of the Highlands, across the northern side of the Southern Uplands and the Lake District as well, there's little pockets where temperatures, the freezing level is much higher, essentially the temperature lifting above freezing on some of the hills and the mountains, all just how the air flows across the hills and locally will just create some in situ warming where the air temperature does just lift. So there could be quite some marked variations even just very locally across the mountain regions by this point. Short-term forecast is much the same as what we've been used to. It's an easterly wind, that's Wednesday's chart, high pressure to the north. We've got that cold air flow out of Scandinavia and still some bands of snow showers which may be locally frequent coming into some eastern parts of the Pennines and around the borders and Cheviots. One or two areas of snow showers and flurries, eastern side of the Highlands, a dry sunny day out toward the west and also mainly dry across Wales and the Lake District. Strength of the wind not quite as marked as recent days, but it's still producing a severe chill factor. It's still a bitterly cold day with very low temperatures across the mountains and pretty much sub-zero into most valleys and glens. Subtle changes by the time we get to Thursday. We just turn the flow a bit more southeasterly. Initially light winds and very low temperatures likely as we go into Thursday morning across the Highlands, but that southeasterly will pick up strength through the day, maybe from the word go across Wales and reaching gale force across many mountains as time is going on. Some very powerful gusts developing to the lee of higher ground across North Wales, across the Lake District and around the Ben Nevis range, places just on the northwestern side of those major summits, some powerful gusts coming down slope from the mountains in this sort of situation. It's broadly a dry day, a few snow flurries around locally, still a lot of blowing snow around, so that will really hamper any visibility on higher tops, but mostly a good amount of sunshine, just a few banks of cloud here and there. It's the battleground then between a strong area of high pressure out towards the east and fronts over the Atlantic trying to make some headway by the end of the week. They're really going to struggle to do it because there's a lot of very cold air that's in place ahead of them, so the fronts that try and have a go will not do too much more than maybe produce a few snow flurries, perhaps just for southwest Wales, southwest England. Otherwise, it's again a dry day with temperatures staying very low. A windy day is likely, and again, those very powerful gusts coming down slope to the north and northwestern side of the major mountains. So a very blustery, cold day once again, temperatures staying well down. It's awkward for detail as we go into the weekend. High pressure still sits toward the east. We've got fronts having a go at just pushing in from the Atlantic from the south-southwest. It's still broadly a cold picture, the mountains staying sub-zero. Temperatures may just be coming up a little bit in places compared to what we will have seen, but some very cold air is still trapped near the surface across Britain, so it's not going to do too much for the general temperature profile. It may just be that some of the higher slopes lifting a few degrees compared to where we've been, trying to set itself up into inversion conditions, or at least very little change of temperature with height. So that's one just to think about in terms of the forecast by this stage. Things have just subtly changed in the atmospheric profiles by this time. There's the scope for some snowfalls in places. That idea of a front just coming into Wales and southwest England may be producing some snow, but I'm not really going to get too clever with that detail. A lot just to play for how that evolves at this time. Many places may well be dry. There'll be some banks of low cloud clinging to some of the south-facing hills. Best of the breaks typically towards the north of major hill groups. Just to show you how that looks on the vertical profile by the weekend, out of interest, this is centred on Wales for Saturday, but it could be almost anywhere as the weekend goes on, it must be said. That idea of an inversion just trying to set itself up. We've got cold, dense air that's trapped in the nearest surface layers, the first few hundred metres up from sea level, but go a little bit higher and the temperature does just tend to rise. We've got less cold air, warmer air, cautiously we'll call it, overriding the very cold air that lies near the surface. So that relatively less dense air that's slightly higher temperature will just come in above the colder air that lies lower down, and that will allow some of the highest mountains to claw their way back towards freezing point compared to being well down at -10 through the middle of this week. But very cold air is still trapped nearer the surface, so it's a situation where all that terrain is more or less staying frozen. There's nothing really of any thaw coming in with that setup. The sense of the red and the blue line, temperature and dew point being close together, just indicates things are saturating out somewhat, so there's a bit more in the way of cloud cover. It could be banks of cloud at various levels, so it all becomes a little bit messy by this stage. The inversion as well will enhance that scope for very powerful gusts. It will force some of the air over the mountains, and that just really exacerbates some of those powerful downslope gusts coming down from some of the corries. Not too much we can do with Sunday's detail at this stage, it must be said. High pressure is still to the east. It's still a powerful southeasterly flow that's across Britain. The idea of some fronts being around, maybe some snowfalls in places, depending on just how far these fronts progress in. The attempt at getting less cold air in from the Atlantic, but it's still taking a while, and really by this stage, as we've seen already, it's still very cold with frozen terrain across the mountains. Just watch for the potential for some snow in places. Now the big question is how long all this cold weather lasts, and there is uncertainty naturally once we go a week or more down the line, but many indications still favour that higher pressure remains blocked towards the north, stopping then the Atlantic southwesterlies really getting too much of a foothold across the British Isles. There's one or two model situations just starting to maybe break down this pattern a little bit as we go beyond the middle of the month, but there's also a pretty strong indication that this concept of high pressure to the north, lower pressure away to the southwest is still the dominant story as we go into the second half of February, which all in all just maintains chilly weather patterns, at the very least very similar to what we've been seeing in many recent weeks. Hopefully that's been of some interest for you today, and you can get out and enjoy some of that snow in your local area at the moment. Thanks for watching. As always, bye for now.